Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I'm checking out the latest brand new release in Hornby's railroad range. Today then I'm looking at a Hornby Railroad steam train pack, which I think might be a first for me. And this pack really piqued my interest when it was first announced, but I didn't dare to get too excited about it, because the last time I got excited about a Hornby Railroad steam train pack, it was that Caledonian 123 pack. That one really excited me, but then it got cancelled before it could be released, so it ended in disappointment. So I didn't dare to get too excited about this one, but it has arrived. So finally, we have this. This is the Hornby 4P Midland Compound Train Pack. And I've been really excited about this pack for a couple of reasons. Right off the bat though, not particularly excited about the coaches. We'll look at them, of course, but those are not what I'm excited about. Of course, I am excited about the locomotive. So this locomotive is back for the first time in many years. This model was first launched back in 1981, so it's over 40 years old now, and it's not been in Hornby's railroad range for many, many years now, 5 to 10 years at the very least. And the last time it turned up in the railroad range, I believe it was just in a plain black livery, which was nice, but a little bit boring. Before that, it was in an LMS livery, I believe, an LMS maroon. So as far as I can tell in the railroad range, this loco has only ever been available in LMS or possibly BR colours. But of course, here we have it in Midland Railway colours, a pre-grouping livery for this locomotive, which, like I say, I don't think has been done, at least for the railroad version of this model before. Also, for the first time ever, this locomotive is in the Hornby Railroad Plus range, which means it's received a paint job befitting of a much higher spec model. And as you can see already, this looks absolutely amazing. Yeah, the previous railroad liveries for this loco were incredibly basic. They didn't have much in the way of lining or picked out details. Hopefully this loco will change that. So thoroughly excited for this. I really am. I know it might seem over the top to be excited about a basic Hornby Railroad train pack, but this hobby needs more stuff like this. It needs more beautiful train packs that people can actually afford. Yeah, I miss those days. So speaking of affordability, this is not dirt cheap or anything. Hornby's RRP is £179.99 for this. Yeah, it's a little bit steep really. At the retailers though, you can pick this up for £161.99. So if we break that down, that works out at about £30 each for the coaches. That is what it is, and just over £100 for the locomotive. So I would say that's on the high side of what is acceptable for Hornby Railroad stuff. But anyway, that's before I've seen this stuff yet, so let's see what this is like. If you'd like to try one of these for yourself, affiliate links down in the description. But for now, I'm going to meet up with an old friend, not seen the Midland compound for ages, so let's get started. So I say I'm just interested in the locomotive in this pack, and unfortunately, as far as I know, this locomotive is only available in this pack. It's not available separately, which is a bit of a shame really. I think if this loco was available by itself for £100–110, I would have been super happy about that. But as it is, this isn't too bad. At least there is a way to get this loco. Anyway, let me show you the end of this pack. So the one I've got here is R30377. It's the Midland Railway Class 4P Compound Train Pack, and it is DCC ready. And that's all she wrote. So with that, let's open up and see what we get inside here. Yeah, I don't think I've ever reviewed a railroad train pack before. I've reviewed lots of train packs that should have been in the railroad range but weren't. But this is the first one that actually was, as far as I know. Right, so a bit of an egg box, but the loco is in proper packaging. The railroad Midland compound was never in proper packaging. That was always in a foam tray. So, yep, that's better. Let's have a look at the instructions then. So, yeah, this is, I suppose, worthy of explanation. So this lists that it's instructions for the compound, county, hunt and schools class railroad locomotives. And that's because all of these models from Hornby date back to the 80s or thereabouts. And then for the railroad range, they were modified and redesigned with new chassis. And so all of these 440 chassis were pretty much the same. The only difference was wheel spacing and such. So yeah, they all share the same basic chassis. And here it is. We've got the lubrication points here, the crank pins and the axles over there. For removing the tender body, it's just a friction fit, and inside there you've got the 8-pin DCC socket. That's the same as it always was from the railroad range, so it doesn't seem as though anything's been modified here. And then on the back, nothing much of interest. Then I think we've just got your basic railroad accessories, which is a pair of vacuum pipes, and that's it for the buffer beams if you want to fit those. But for now, I think we will skip the coaches for now. I will open them up in just a second. But first, I want to take a look at the loco. So here we go. Never taken this railroad compound out of this sort of packaging before. Hopefully that means this loco is going to be a lot fancier than I've ever seen it before. Ooh, gosh. Goodness me, that's an ugly seam line across the top. But otherwise, yep, I can already see that this has been painted pretty nicely. I have to say the finish isn't as good as we saw on the Lord of the Isles. Yeah, the Dean single, that had a much better satin sheen to it. This kind of looks more like the compound always did. A little bit on the plasticky side. But yeah, looking at the side, you can see we've got a bit more complexity in the decoration here, which is good. Anyway, let's lift this up. Okay, so yeah, it feels pretty much the same as it used to. A pretty lightweight locomotive. It does have a die-cast chassis, but obviously the body and the running plate, these are all made of plastic. But yeah, there she is, looking far better than I've ever seen this model look before. I think back in the 80s they did paint these with a bit more complexity. But obviously that's the 80s. They weren't really capable of doing such a good paint job as this back then. So yeah, that looks absolutely gorgeous, and we'll go over the paint job in just a second. Next though, we need to take a little look at the coaches. So let's start with this one at the bottom. I'll tell you why I'm laughing in just a second. It's not really funny, I just laugh at things because I do. Anyway, yeah, there it is. Midland coach, this one's number 2910, and I suspect that this is a Great Western clerestory that's just been painted into Midland colours. In fact, I've got one here just for this occasion. Yeah, it looks quite different, of course, because of the decoration, but clearly tooling-wise, yeah, this is the same coach. So it's a very old-fashioned Great Western clerestory coach. Not quite a Rapido Evolution coach, is it? But for about half the price of one of those, I suppose it's not too bad. And then we've got the brake. Let's have a look at this. I mean, say what you want about them. They're not detailed. They're obviously not accurate, but they are nicely painted. I do like all of the lining on this. And that, of course, will have had a bit of a cost attached to it. So, you know, it's a railroad coach. Realism isn't really on the table. Is it going to look pretty next to the Midland compound? Yeah, I think it probably will. So with that, let's have a bit of background on the Midland compound, and then we'll take a closer look at some of these models. Also known as the Midland Railway 1000 class, and I suppose we should be referring to it as such, given that this model is in Midland Railway livery. These locomotives started life in 1902, when just 5 of these 3-cylinder compound locos were produced by Samuel Johnson for passenger work. Richard Dealey further developed the locomotives, simplifying yet enlarging the design before they were eventually rebuilt by Henry Fowler. The class was very successful. When the LMS was formed, the class was chosen to serve as the standard LMS Express locomotive, as they were powerful, fairly fast, capable of up to about 85 miles per hour, and they were versatile due to their modest size. 45 of the 1000 class were built in total, followed by 195 LMS compound locomotives built through the 1920s. These were essentially identical, giving 240 of these engines in total. Most of which survived into the BR era as well, so there are some British Rail modelling opportunities with this, but only one of them has been preserved, and that is the original number 1000. So there she is, up close and personal for you, number 1009, and you know what? This is beautiful. Yeah, I really enjoy this. For just over £100 effectively, this is not too bad at all. And I can't believe I'm saying that because I used to pay less than half of that for a Midland compound some years ago. But, you know, I have to accept that times have changed. And this, to be fair, is the best looking Hornby Midland compound I've ever bought. It is exactly the same model though as before, nothing's changed except for the decoration, which we're going to get into in just a second. I think the tooling has degraded a little bit since this loco's last outing. Yeah, that parting line on top of the firebox is pretty bad now. Here's how it looked on my red compound. So yeah, there is a difference. The fit of the dome is noticeably a bit worse than it used to be as well. So yeah, the model's aging for sure, but I do think the paint job does make up for it a little bit. So on closer inspection and comparison, the finish is slightly better than we've seen before. So here's the new model, as you can see, and here's the previous LMS one. Yeah, it's not a massive difference, but the new release does look slightly better, I think. I also think the colour choice is slightly better as well. It's a richer shade, which I think is improved. It's less pink, really. The old one did kind of look pink, particularly on the buffer beams. Look at these, definitely pink. And here's the new one. More of a red, which is less confusing and more correct. But anyway, let's take a look at the decoration then. So we've got splashes, which are fully painted. Before in the Railroad range, these splashes were lined, but the tops of the splashes were left red, whereas here they're painted black, which looks so much better. We've got lining on the cylinders as well, that's new, and also lining on the steps. This was never a feature of the old Railroad compound. We've also got quite a few details picked out. So the builder's plate has printing on it. Previously that would be blank, and some of the fittings on the smoke box have been picked out as well. I think those look way better for that. On the side of the cab, we've got the Midland Railway crest there. That's a lovely print. Not seen that before on this particular model. And all the handrails around the cab here, these have been picked out as much as they are just a part of the moulding. Around the front, the smoke box looks miles better than it used to. So it's got all of the hinges picked out, it's got the lamp bracket on the front painted, and obviously we've got the number and the shed code printed to the front as well. The front buffer beam also looks fantastic. We've got all of this lining on it, plus the Midland Railway lettering. So the loco is miles better looking now for that paint job, which I think makes this worth more than the previous Railroad models. We've also got a painted cab. That is not something we see very often in the Hornby Railroad range. It's not brilliantly painted, we've just got the one colour in there and it's kind of indiscriminately painted on, but it's far better than just a blank detailless cab, so that I really enjoy. Let's go over some of the details this model's got then. So here's a look at the wheels. Plastic wheels with metal tyres, same as before. This model is very light, it weighs in at just 236 grams loco and tender. That's a little bit more than Dapol's D-Class, to name another 440, but it's still only about the same as a Bachmann 08 shunter, which is a shunter, not an express passenger locomotive like this. And as such, it does need the rubber traction tyres on its wheels, which is a shame. And I spent a lot of time converting my other Railroad 440s so that they don't have these tyres, but yeah, obviously this one still does. The running plate is very basic on this model. No real detailing on here, except for a few large components which are moulded on. Here's a look at the cylinders and the crosshead. Noticeably, the crosshead is just made of plastic, which doesn't look that great, and it's painted black weirdly on this livery. I don't know if that's prototypical or not, to be honest with you. Then on the body, we've got the pipework, or is that the reverser? It might be the reverser. Either way, it's not separately fitted, it is just moulded on. But we do have metal wire handrails, which are separately fitted as well, as much as most of the detail on the side here is just moulded. All of this detail on the smoke box door, likewise, that's just moulded on, although it looks fine because of the decoration. Although over on the other side of the smoke box, there are some separately fitted parts here, although they don't have much fidelity because obviously this was tooled up back in the 80s. And behind there, I guess this would be the reverser then, and this is a separately fitted part as well. Then in front of the cab, you can see we do have a turned metal whistle, which is really good to see. I like that a lot, plus the safety valve assembly, which actually looks pretty good. Yeah, that's a decently moulded piece, and that's painted black as per this livery. We do have the window frames picked out, but unfortunately no glazing here, so it is a basic model. Let's move on and take a look at the tender then, and yeah, the finish of the tender is a little bit better. I think the black areas, for some reason, seem to have more of a shine to them, so the coal certainly shines. The side of the tender just looks gorgeous because of the paint job. Lovely rich colours, very precise lining, and the number on the side is beautifully printed, far better than we've seen on the railroad compounds before. The underframe is also just great. It's just quite incredible what a decent paint job can do. So we've got the springs and the axle boxes left black. That's fairly standard for this model. But now we've got all of the arches and different features of the tender lined, including the steps. This just looks so much better than it used to. Then around the front, even some of the controls here have been picked out and painted. I mean, they've really gone to town with the paint job on this one. It's quite impressive. And then we've got the coal load, of course, which is not removable, and it's very sort of large and bulbous. And that's because this locomotive used to be, back in the 80s, tender driven. It's only since this appeared in the railroad range that Hornby have upgraded it to put the drive into the loco. But of course the tooling for the tender body still exists, and the massive bulbous coal load is part of that, and I think it was that tall to accommodate the original Ringfield motor. The tender handrails are wire and separately fitted. That's unusual because they're not on the loco, so yeah, go figure. And then around the back we do have some of the tender's plates picked out. Really like to see that. And then we've got another similarly detailed buffer beam with the metal buffers. Don't think I've mentioned the buffers, although these are not sprung, which is about as you'd expect. Now the couplings are actually NEM. They're the large D-shaped tension lock couplings, which I don't like very much, but they are NEM, so if you wanted to exchange those, you could do. I think they've used the large D-shape couplings because the couplings on the coaches are not NEM, and you're stuck with the large D-shaped ones on the coaches, so I guess to match the coaches, they've gone with these couplings, but that's fair enough. Right, speaking of the coaches then, we'll just be very brief with this, because obviously these are not proper Midland coaches and they're nothing that we haven't seen before. So if you're interested in these coaches, check out my review of the Great Western Clerestory coach, which is the same thing just in a different paint job, and I'll put a link up there in the top right. So yeah, most of the detail is just moulded. The handrails and such, besides the doors, these are just part of the moulding, but they are picked out as per this livery, which is good. And I do think the biggest feature of these models is the decoration. So beautifully lined, done to modern standards for sure, and the finish ironically is even better than the loco, again I think because of the black. As you can see, the black sections on the roof here have a real bit of a sheen to them, which I like a lot. Right, let me just show you the basics then. So here's a look at the end. Yeah, basic moulded detail here. Here's a look at the bogies. Again, I don't think any of this is separately fitted, but we do have metal wheels, which is good to see. And I think that's pretty much it for the coaches. They are very simple. Anyway, back to the locomotive though. It's been a long time since I've looked at one of these, so I'm interested to rediscover the mechanism and of course see how the latest release of this Midland compound runs. So with that, let's get started. So there she is, down onto the track, the Hornby Midland compound, and this just looks gorgeous. I love 440s, I really do, and when I was just getting started in this hobby, the Hornby Railroad 440s played a massive part of the hobby for me, really. I loved these things. I had a couple of the compounds, I had a couple of the counties as well. I think 3 of the school's locomotives. I enjoyed those, and the hardest one I remember to find would be the D49 or the Hunt class. All using similar chassis to this, in fact the same chassis, just with a slightly different setup. And so I'm hoping that we might even see some of those models come back, possibly in train packs. I mean, the Great Western County with the Clerestory coaches, that seems possible. But anyway, we've got this one for now, and I've already filmed the performance test and running in. I'll show you all of that in just a minute. Up next though, let's talk about the mechanism. And this hasn't changed much really, but I don't think I've reviewed one of these maybe since I've actually started going into a lot of detail on the mechanism. So with that, let's jump in. Pickup wise then, these are a little bit hard to see, but all of the tender wheels do have wiper pickups, which is great. And both sets of loco driving wheels also have wiper pickups on them, as you'd expect. But bear in mind, 2 of the wheels on the loco do have traction tyres on, and those traction tyres obviously are going to isolate those wheels. So really, we've only got about 4 pickups per rail, which is not too bad really. And the pickups are spread far enough apart so that we've got decent reliability. Here's the drawbar between the loco and tender. So this is a screwed drawbar, so it's good and strong. Although disconnecting loco and tender is tricky / impossible because there's no plug for the wires. The wires are hardwired at each end. But there are ways to service this thing without needing to disconnect the tender, so that's okay. Another question, why have we got a single blue wire? That's definitely not the way these models used to be made, so I wonder, maybe did they run out of the black wire so they used blue instead? But obviously I'll point out that we don't want brightly coloured wires going between loco and tender because they're not supposed to be noticeable. So yeah, hopefully that's not a new thing from Hornby now, to start seeing coloured wires going between loco and tender. Anyway, for servicing, the base keeper plate is held on with 3 screws, but because the loco and tender are semi-permanently coupled together, the best way to remove the base keeper is to just unscrew the tender and then pull it up and round so that the base keeper comes away. And then you can get access to the axles, of course, which do have proper separate bearings on them. Really good to see that on a budget loco, I suppose. We've also got the rear axle driven, as you can see. And here's an interesting thing, you can see how these chassis are multi-purpose. So there's a second slot in the chassis for, well, it looks like a third axle, but that's so that a shorter wheelbase 440 can be produced using the same chassis. I forget which one it is that uses that formation. It might be the Great Western County, which has its wheels closer together, possibly others as well. But yeah, that's interesting. We don't see that many chassis designed for multiple different classes of locomotive these days. So yeah, fascinating stuff. Then for body removal, it should just have been the 1 screw underneath the front bogie, which I duly unscrewed. But then the body wouldn't come off, and it turns out I think some of the glue from the assembly process had got onto the cylinders and was stopping the body coming off. So I ended up doing a bit of brute force there, but I think mostly we're okay. So here's the chassis. It's a very, very basic chassis, although it is made of metal. It's die-cast, so that's good. Here is the motor. It's just a 3-pole motor, unfortunately, according to Hornby, and that does mean that the slow speed performance isn't brilliant from this loco, but these motors do seem to be reasonably reliable, at least. And then looking at the worm gear, you can see that we've got a flywheel turned into this part, which is really good to see. So it's not a separate flywheel, but technically the loco does have a flywheel, so that's really good, again, for a railroad loco. And for DCC fitting, the socket is inside the tender. A little bit of a pain to get the tender body off without doing any damage, but eventually I did manage to lever the tender body off from the front using a small flat-bladed screwdriver. And it's very basic inside here as well, just the 8-pin DCC socket, and that's it. No speaker or anything, although obviously that's not a surprise. And then for the gauging, the loco's back-to-backs came in at 14.3mm, quite reliably, so that's comfortably below the standard, although the tender wheels were a little bit tighter at between 14.4 and 14.5mm, but that's all within reason, I would say. No real issue with the gauging. So yeah, it's a decent mechanism, this. It's got the basics. I do wish that it didn't have traction tyres and was a little bit heavier. That's a shame. And also a 5-pole motor would have improved the performance as well. But otherwise, you know, at least it's serviceable, at least it's relatively high quality. So this model stands a good chance of lasting. Anyway, let's move on to performance then, and I'll show you how that went. So obviously I've run lots of these locos on the channel, but I've never run one that was produced recently. I think my last newest 440 must be 5 or more years old now. So how are these things running to date? Let's have a look. First ever try, forwards direction, bit of power. Damn, that was a pretty good start, wasn't it? Crikey. Now, I don't remember these being particularly amazing. They've always been nice and reliable, which is good, but I don't remember them being that great at the slow speeds, although the way that started then gives me some confidence. That seemed remarkably smooth. Anyway, let's run by at 50% speed, see what the gearing's like. Here we go, 50. So I think it's sensible, and obviously quite a fast loco in real life, so full speed. Yep, that's really good. I really am on board, pardon the pun, with that gearing. Oh, that sounded poncy. Anyway, let's have a look and see what this is like at the slow speeds. Now, this needs running in. I've not run it in yet, so I'll do all of this again later on. But right now, out of the box, can it crawl? Turning up. I'm doing it real slow. All right. So that's, I think we've found the slowest point there, and it's not smooth. A bit faster. Yeah, it's getting smoother. No, still jerky. A bit more then. Alright, yeah, fair enough. That's about what I remember. I thought, because of how smooth it appeared to start, that this was going to be better. But no, it's about the same, although that's not bad. It's getting smoother. And at that speed, it's nice and smooth. Less so in reverse. So I think it really needs running in. I'm just trying to think whether or not I should do the torque test. I think I will do, but very briefly. Don't try this at home. It's got traction tyres. It won't thank me for this. But anyway, 50% briefly. Yep, plenty of torque there. Okay, well, that's checking out. So it's a budget locomotive. The performance doesn't seem to be quite at the levels that we've seen from premium models. I guess that's kind of to be expected, but perhaps things will improve as it runs in. So with that, let's see how this gets on around the track at 50% speed. Okay, here goes. Okay, here she comes. How's the performance around the curves then? Second radius. Pretty good. So yeah, the performance is definitely more than adequate. Seems to be nice and smooth. I've not seen this have any trouble over the points yet. Can't imagine that happening either. I've never had that issue with these 440s. So yeah, it's not the greatest performer in the world, but it's a budget model, and I think the performance is just the job really for a beginner or for a casual enthusiast. So yeah, that's really, really good. And of course, this thing is so beautiful looking. I've said it before and I'll say it again, the difference a really nice paint job makes cannot be overstated, you know. It really does improve a model just to have a few extra details picked out and to have slightly higher quality paint on the thing. Something that I'm really glad Hornby are doing now. Yeah, it makes the railroad range so much better. Anyway, I'll be back very shortly then, and we'll pop the coaches on and see what this train pack looks like all together running around the track. Alright, don't go anywhere, I'll see you in just a minute. Okay, that is running in complete. And yeah, these are lovely runners. They always were. Well, yeah, I guess they were in the 80s as well, but since they were upgraded to Loco Drive, they are much, much better than they used to be. More reliable, certainly smoother, and I don't know if these are better at crawling than the Ringfields. I think if you got a good Ringfield motor, then you could have had a really good crawler, but yeah, these are certainly more consistent anyway, and they require a lot less maintenance, which I like these days because I don't have that much time for servicing. Anyway, let me re-demonstrate the performance. I won't do the torque test again for obvious reasons, but here's the speed. Yep, maybe it's a little more lively, but it's about as it was. Yeah, sensibly geared, I would say. Obviously, yeah, we can do some real emergency stops with this loco because of the traction tyres, and that also means you won't get that exciting wheel slip that you get when you accelerate the loco, because obviously it can't really slip because of the traction tyres. Anyway, I digress. What about the crawl then? Is this any better? Let's ease this up very gradually. It was all right before, but it was a bit coggy and not particularly slow, so has that changed? It's buzzing. Yeah, not really changed, and I have to say that's not much of a surprise. This is pretty much in line with the old 440s that I've got in the railroad range, so no real difference there. I mean, it's okay, and on DCC they do run a little better at the slow end, but obviously most of my reviews are filmed on analog, so that's the better comparison really. And yeah, I think it's certainly true to say that we've seen better. Let's have a look in reverse. Bit more, I think. Yeah, so it's not quite as good in reverse, and I have run it in the backwards direction as well as forwards. So yeah, it's weird that it should be a little worse in reverse. I'm a poet and I didn't know it. Or maybe I did. Maybe I am a poet and I did know it. I don't know. What am I talking about? Let's stop. Anyway, yeah, it's fine, isn't it? It's not breaking any records for how smooth and fantastic it is at the slow speeds, but as a relatively budget model that realistically, minus the coaches, cost about £100, what are you going to say? You know, it's okay. It's about what you'd expect. Right, so let's bring the coaches back into the equation then. I've got those coupled up. At the very least, they're quite pretty looking, aren't they? So let's back up the loco and see what this train pack looks like when it's all together. Here we go. Try and do this nice and steady. All right, shouldn't be any issues with the couplings because they're so wide, so the hooks should engage. Trying to do this steadily. I think I should be able to. Yeah, not bad. So yeah, again, perfectly usable, and yeah, we've got them, haven't we? Right, so there it is, all together, loco and 2 coaches. It's obviously not a big train, but it is more or less a complete train. So for £160, it's about £10 less than a premium Acura scale loco. This isn't bad, you know, this is a budget train, it's pre-grouping. There's not that many budget options when it comes to pre-grouping, so this I like a lot. Anyway, let's get going then. So I'm not going to go at 50, I'm going to go about 40, I think, because that's a bit more sensible looking. And off she goes. Right, so this has excited me. This review has presented me with a lovely opportunity to get out some of my other Hornby Railroad 440s. So on the inside line, and it's wheel slipping, which should ring alarm bells. In fact, it won't need help. Yes, it will, because I don't want to be here all day. And that's because I did surgery on most of my Hornby Railroad 440s so that they don't have traction tyres. Yes, I don't like traction tyres that much. I actually went through hell and high water to purge these locos of them. Now, it's struggling for now, but as you'll see in a moment, it is fine. It's actually hauling 4 coaches here. And yeah, this process was well worth it, I think, but it's not for the faint-hearted. It was a pain. It involved me buying up Hornby's spare wheel sets for these locomotives, and then pulling the wheels off the axles with the gears and putting them onto axles without the gears, so that I've got all 4 wheels, all 4 drivers without traction tyres. And then I've put some weight in the boilers. I don't know if I did with this one. This one feels quite light, but with some of them I did. So it's possible, it is possible to weigh up the locomotive, add some ballast to it, remove the traction tyres, and make a nicer loco without the risk of those rubber traction tyres perishing. And if I get this going at about 40, you'll see she does manage these coaches just fine. And then on the inside line, we've got, I think, one of the more recent Midland compounds I bought from Hornby, and I believe this one came from Hornby's advent calendar, back when they used to put deals in the calendars, and I think I picked this one up for £45. And yeah, I mean, obviously this is going to be cheaper than the Midland one because the livery's so much simpler, but yeah, I do miss the days when you could get a Hornby Railroad loco for less than 50 quid. But anyway, there we go, and because she's in a plain black, I've decided to run freight with her. And she's another one without the tyres. But anyway, let's revisit the Midland version with the tyres. Okay, here we go. And she's got rubber tyres, so she's not going to start wheel slipping around these curves. I think I can guarantee that. And yeah, at 40, she is slowing down a little bit, but not too much. And I have to say, realistic or not, I do love the way this train looks. It's quite crazy that we've got a train that looks like this in Hornby's railroad range. I would never have believed that, and 10 years ago if I'd seen this, I would have been very excited by it. Of course, it's not very realistic. The coaches don't really match the loco. I said earlier on, I mean, I'm pretty sure these are the Great Western Clerestories, but something in my head is making me doubt that. They're not LNER ones, are they, originally? I don't know. I'm pretty sure they're not Midland ones, though. Although, yeah, if you know what specific coaches these are based on, do comment down below and let me know. I think it's the Great Western ones, and I've certainly, as we saw earlier on, got some of these coaches in Great Western colours. But yeah, is that what they were originally designed to do? I think so, but I could be wrong. Anyway, yeah, not dreadfully realistic, even if they are sort of Midland design, which I don't think they are. Obviously, they're not super detailed, they're not super premium, they're very, very simple on features, but they look okay, they work fine, and altogether, this is a functional train pack that is really, really enjoyable. You know, I can see someone getting this for Christmas or for their birthday or something, and catching the model railways bug from it, you know. It does a really good job of demonstrating the beauty of pre-grouping railways, but at a relatively reasonable price. So yeah, for that reason, while this isn't the greatest train pack in the world, obviously, in terms of detail, I love it. I really do like it. And for the right modeler, I think I could recommend this. Let's have some ratings then for Hornby's brand new Midland Railway compound train pack. And I really like this set, you know, I think it's enjoyable, but in terms of the ratings, I've got to consider what other models are available. So yes, the ratings are on the low side, because quite obviously as a railroad pack, these models are extremely basic. Also, bear in mind I'm focusing on the locomotive here, but this pack also includes the coaches, so I will be referencing those at times as well. So, level of detail I've given half marks. Now, it doesn't get less than half marks because the paintwork and the decoration is really good. So it's got a great finish, it's got some painted cab detail now as well, and quite a lot of different parts picked out on the bodywork. That looks fantastic. On the downside though, the model is very, very simple. It relies on a lot of moulded detail. It doesn't have sprung buffers. There's no detail between the frames. There's no sort of serious cab detail in here with all the different separate parts and different bits picked out. No lighting or anything like that, and some fairly coarse detail on this loco too. The coaches are even more basic. They're very, very simple and not accurate to Midland coaches as far as I know. Performance then I've given 4-star, and generally the performance is really nice. So the loco is smooth, it's got a great range of speeds, and I think at half power it runs at a very sensible speed as well. The coaches are nothing special, but they work as they should as well, which is good. The reason I can't give this 5-star is because it doesn't crawl particularly well. This is faultless at all speeds except to crawl, so it's pretty close to 5, but not quite. Pulling power then came in at 0.3 newtons or 20 coaches on straight and level track. Yeah, that's not a whole lot. I mean, if this didn't have traction tyres, I would say that's pretty decent. But given that this has actually got rubber on its driving wheels, that's not as much as I would have expected. That's about the same as Hornby's new Black 5, but it is less than Bachmann's Midland compound, and Bachmann's model actually does not have rubber traction tyres. It's just slightly higher quality, it's certainly heavier. So yeah, the pulling power is okay. It's going to handle a decent number of coaches and certainly handle the 2 coaches that it comes with without any problems, but it's certainly not a powerhouse. Mechanism then I've given 3-star. Now on the plus side it's got some quality features, so it's got plenty of pickups including in the tender. We don't always see that with Hornby railroad locos. Plus we've got proper bearings on the driving axles. On the downside though, we've got the outdated drawbar with colourful wires used, or at least one of them. Yeah, that was a bit strange. Rubber traction tyres, of course, not a big fan of that. Only a 3-pole motor and possibly a 5-pole motor would have provided a better crawl. We've also got no pre-fitted speaker in this loco, which is not unexpected of course, but it's worth bearing in mind. Quality then I've given 3.5-star. Yeah, this is quite a plasticky model really, the loco and the coaches, but particularly the loco. Very plastic, that's why it's so light of course, that's why the tyres were necessary. Up close, some of the paintwork on the loco is not the greatest, some of the parts that have been picked out are not that evenly painted, and also there is evidence that the tooling is starting to age a little bit now. The moulding's not so good up on the top, we've got a very noticeable moulding line and more flashing up there than I've seen before. So 3.5 on quality, it's not terrible, but it's not amazing either. You do kind of get what you pay for here. Speaking of getting what you pay for, value for money then, yeah, it's kind of upper middle of the road for me. I think the RRP of £179.99 is a little bit steep. Now, bear in mind this is a complete train, and £179.99 is about the price that you'd pay for a premium locomotive, so that's pretty good. But then of course this is not a premium locomotive, nor are the coaches premium coaches. Very, very basic, very simple in their level of detail, and they look better than they are because of the decoration. So I think the RRP is pushing it a little bit. £161.99 though is the retailer price, and that is obviously more realistic. That works out at about £30 each per coach, which I think is okay given the complexity of their decoration, and just over £100 for the locomotive, which is a lot more than I've paid for these Midland compound models in the past, but obviously the decoration's much better on these as well. So I've given it 3.5-star. It's not amazing value, but it's certainly the cheapest way to put together a Midland railway train, I think. So yeah, that counts for something. Overall then, that is 6.48 out of 10, or a grade of E. Now obviously that seems a little bit harsh, but I think it makes sense. This is a very basic model, it's got no frills and it's not supposed to have. So I'm not saying this is terrible or anything, it's just compared with other models out there. This is obviously very basic and it's very stripped back in terms of features. It is, however, functional and relatively inexpensive, at least compared with other train packs out there. So take that as you will. Into the logbook we go then, and it's 9th place above Bachmann's Rebecca and below the EFE Rail Class 144. Could I recommend this train pack? Well, yeah, if you're interested in the Midland Railway perhaps, and you're on a budget and you don't want to buy, let's say, the Bachmann Midland Compound or one of the Rapido Midland 440s, plus some Evolution coaches to go with it, then yeah, this is an option. This will cost you less than those examples, and like I say, this stuff is perfectly functional. Alright then folks, well that will just about do it for this review. The Hornby Midland Railway 1000 class. I keep calling it the compound. I mean, it is a compound, but it's also a 1000 class. With the ex-Great Western, I think, coaches. That's possibly the least specific sentence I've ever uttered on this channel. But anyway, hopefully you get my drift. So my question for you today is, what are your predictions / hopes for packs in this sort of vein in the future? What other railroad locomotives would you like to see come back, possibly in some new liveries, maybe pre-grouping, maybe not? And what rolling stock would you like to see paired with them? What do you expect to see? What would you like to see? Please do comment down below and let me know. I would love to see the Great Western County with the clerestories come back. I think that would be a really fancy train pack. But I don't know. We may never see any more at all. This may not be a success. It may fail. They may not sell. Who knows? But if it does go well, I'd love to see more like this. Anyway, if you'd like to try one of these, if you'd like to help send the message that we like packs like this, and you'd like to buy one, there are affiliate links down in the description, so check those out if you like. But for now, I'll say thank you very, very much for watching, and I'll catch you for another video very, very soon. Alright, cheers folks, you take care.